We used to call it NAFTA. We're going to call it the United States Mexico Trade Agreement. We'll get rid of the name NAFTA. It has a bad connotation because the United States was hurt very badly by NAFTA for many years, and now it's a really good deal for both countries.
So that's President Trump speaking earlier today at the White House as he announced this new agreement between the United States and Mexico, notably calling it essentially not NAFTA, Carol, but an agreement in principle that still will need to be ratified by the U.S. Congress, although we did hear commentary from the Mexican government that it does fit what their legislature was looking for. So more to come on that as Canada comes to the table at this point. To help us understand where we stand now and where we go from here, we bring in Clayton Allen. He is Vice President of Special Situations at Hike Capital Markets down in Washington. He joins us on the phone. Clayton, great to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
So where do we go from here? I mean, obviously, this announcement was made today. It was widely anticipated that this would come down. Canada, as I said, on its way to Washington in the form of Chrystia Freeland, the trade minister. What do you see happening next?
Well, I think it's going to be an all-out push to get some deal done by the end of the week. Without a deal by the 31st or maybe even early on the morning of September 1st, there doesn't really seem to be a way to hold to that timeline that allows Peña Nieto to sign a new agreement by December 1st before leaving office.
And what happens if that doesn't happen in your estimation?
Well, if that doesn't happen, I think life gets a little bit harder for AMLO. The first thing he would do, if we don't have a timeline that allows Nieto to sign the deal, then it kind of falls to AMLO, and that gets to be the first thing that he handles when he comes into office. AMLO,
of course, being the new Mexican president who is set to take office later this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the president-elect.
Manuel Lopez Obrador. Hey, Clayton, let me ask you, you guys do advisory firm, advisory work, research, investment banking, all that good stuff. How does what's happening in Washington right now change what you're telling your clients?
I don't know that it really changes what we're telling people. I think that this is, to be honest, this is actually kind of consistent with the way that the president has negotiated or really handled negotiations for a variety of other topics, whether that's trade negotiations or even his negotiations with North Korea. We've kind of seen very similar tactics at play in each one of those instances, and it really hasn't changed in this one either.
So, Clayton, I got to ask you, you worked, I believe, for Senator Mary Landrieu. You also worked for the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. You are familiar, I should also point out, you're a graduate of LSU, so you know something about college football as well as Georgetown, Hoya Saxa. Just throwing that in there. But you are, what's important is you are intimately familiar with the ways of Capitol Hill. How is this being received as you talk to people in and around Congress? I know it's sort of a sleepy time in general, but how does this play through the legislative aspect here?
So I think that's the most important question that no one's really asking. I think it depends, as everything does, on whether you ask a Democrat or Republican.
Right.
But in general, people in Congress or members of Congress, outside of a few notable exceptions, seem to be at least a little bit frustrated with the president's willingness to kind of keep them up to date about what he's doing. Mm-hmm. It seems like he's done a lot of things sort of unilaterally in a host of trade negotiations and other negotiations for that matter. And so people really feel like they've been given the cold shoulder. And that doesn't really help build up a lot of support for what you're about to present to them when you have people like Kevin Brady, who chair of House Ways and Means, who's one of the, if not the most important members of Congress when it comes to trade policy, saying, look, I'm fine with you negotiating stuff, but you have to keep us in the loop, and you have to adhere to the negotiating objectives we laid out under Trade Promotion Authority.
Well, I'm just thinking if I was having this conversation around a family dinner table, that some folks would say, well, Congress has no one to blame but themselves because they, have over the last few years not been able to get much done. So President Obama did it too with executive orders and taking, initiatives on his own. And we're seeing it with President Trump. I mean, this is kind of the world that we're in right now.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree in the slightest. And I think that people are absolutely right to say that, yeah, look, a lot of Congress's complaints really do boil down to the fact that they could have done a lot more at a lot of different places. But that doesn't alleviate the fact that to get a new NAFTA agreement into law, you still have to get Congress on board. And to get Congress on board, the best way to do it, really the only way to do it, is to go through the fast-track authority that Trade Promotion Authority lays out. And it's up to Congress if they feel that the president's adhered to all the requirements that TPA makes of him.
But just quickly, 20 seconds, is it different because you've got midterms looming, and so Congress is going to say, well, we got to do something?
Absolutely. It is vastly different because there might be a Democratic House next year. The most important thing Trump did today was say that he's going to get rid of the current NAFTA once we get a new deal, because that puts leverage not on our negotiating partners but on Congress. Next year they get to choose. Do you take Trump's new NAFTA, whatever it's called, or no NAFTA at all?
Politics makes it interesting, that's for sure. Clayton Allen, thank you. Vice President of Special Situations at Hite Capital Markets. Clayton joining us on the phone from Washington, D.C. I feel like everything we talk about right now, Jason, we have to look through the lens to some extent of the midterm elections.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I think this becomes a lot more complicated if it goes from just a political win to something that the White House then has to sell up the street or up Pennsylvania Avenue, as it were. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on